In the heart of the Himalayas, a storm was brewing. But this wasn't a storm of wind and rain. It was a digital tempest, born from the glowing screens of Nepal's youth. For years, Generation Z had been watching a story unfold, a tale of two Nepals. In their Nepal, youth unemployment was a plague. Economic opportunities were drying up and the dream of a stable future felt like a cruel joke. They scrolled through job listings that went nowhere, listened to their parents worry about rising costs, and felt the crushing weight of a system that seemed designed to hold them down. Every day, they were confronted with the other Nepal, the one that lived on their Instagram and TikTok feeds. This was the Nepal of the Nepo babies, the sons and daughters of the political elite. Their feeds were a curated fantasy of designer handbags, luxury European vacations, and extravagant parties. They flaunted wealth that felt impossible to the average Nepali, a constant, glittering reminder of the corruption that everyone knew was rampant. Each post was a digital slap in the face, a testament to the deep, cavernous divide between the rulers and the ruled. The disconnect was jarring, and the resentment was simmering just below the surface. This wasn't just about jealousy, it was about justice. The youth of Nepal saw this ostentatious display of wealth not as the fruits of hard work, but as the spoils of corruption. They connected the dots between the crumbling infrastructure in their neighborhoods and the new sports car on a minister's son's feed. They saw the lack of medicine in public hospitals and the photos of a politician's daughter shopping in Milan. The lavish lifestyles of these political heirs became a symbol of everything wrong with the country. The systemic graft, the lack of accountability, and a political class that saw public service not as a duty, but as a family business. The frustration was palpable, a collective sigh that echoed through online forums and private chat groups. Medical student Nabin Pudel would later describe the feeling perfectly, calling the movement that was about to erupt undeniably legitimate, embodying years of accumulated frustration over systemic corruption and decades of ineffective leadership. The politicians seemed old, out of touch, and completely indifferent to the struggles of the very people they were meant to serve. They were relics of a bygone era, while their children were the obnoxious, high-definition symbols of their parents' failures. The stage was set for a confrontation, and all it needed was a spark. Before the streets erupted, the first shots of the revolution were fired in 140 characters or less. It started quietly, as most digital movements do. A comment here, a shared post there, but soon, it coalesced around a few powerful, cutting hashtags. Nepo kid, Nepo babies began to trend, first on TikTok and Reddit, then spreading like wildfire across all platforms. #Youth against corruption. These weren't just insults, they were political statements. They were a shorthand for a generation's anger, a way to instantly call out the unearned privilege and inherited power that was choking the nation's progress. Every time someone used the hashtag, they were joining a chorus of dissent. The movement quickly gained momentum, evolving beyond just mocking the elite. Hashtags like #Youth Against Corruption became rallying cries. Young Nepalis could gather, share stories, expose instances of graft they witnessed in their daily lives. A blurry photo of a government vehicle being used for a family picnic would go viral. A screenshot of a tender awarded to a politician's unqualified relative would be shared thousands of times. Social media became a decentralized newsroom and a public court, where the youth were both the journalists and the jury, meticulously documenting the failures of the state and its ruling class. This digital uprising was powerful because it was authentic and leaderless. It wasn't orchestrated by a political party or a charismatic figurehead. It was an organic explosion of shared frustration, bubbling up from countless bedrooms and tea shops across the country. The memes were sharp, the TikToks were scathing, and the message was undeniable. We see you. We see the corruption, we see the nepotism, and we are not going to be silent anymore. The government, used to controlling the narrative through traditional media, was completely blindsided. Faced with a digital rebellion they couldn't control the Ali government made a fateful decision. Instead of addressing the grievances fueling the online firestorm, they decided to cut the cord. Citing threats to national harmony and decency, the government announced a sweeping ban on 26 platforms: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, YouTube, Twitter. In their minds, they were silencing the dissent. In reality, they were pouring gasoline on a raging fire. This act of censorship was described by many as the last straw, The final, unforgivable insult from a government disconnected from its people. The ban misunderstood modern Nepal. For Gen Z, social media was a lifeline. Connected with friends, got their news, ran their small businesses, expressed their identities. About 80% of internet traffic flowed through these platforms. The ban attacked their way of life. A paternalistic, authoritarian move that screamed, "We will not listen. Now, we will not even let you speak." The government thought it could control information, but it was about to lose control of the state. The response was immediate and defiant. The youth raised online wouldn't be silenced. They became digital guerrillas overnight. VPN demand skyrocketed. Proton VPN reported a 6,000% increase in signups from Nepal in 3 days. The ban backfired. It made youth more determined, organized, and angrier. It proved the government wasn't just corrupt, it was scared. A movement of hashtags memes was about to spill onto the pavement. Shutting down online spaces pushed youth to claim physical ones. Anger left the screens ready to flood Kathmandu's streets. The message spread via newly encrypted channels, word of mouth. The fight moved offline. The ban was the tipping point. Simmering discontent became a real-world uprising. The government wanted silence, it got a revolution. As the movement transitioned from online chatter to on-the-ground action, it needed a nerve center. That center became a Discord server. It was expertly organized by a civic group called Hami Nepal. Hami Nepal began as an NGO focused on humanitarian aid. It was founded by 36-year-old activist Sudan Gurung after he lost his son in the 2015 earthquake. Guided by the motto, "For the people by the people," they specialized in connecting those in need with helpers. The initial protests were massive but peaceful, a sea of young faces demanding to be heard. They carried signs mocking the Nepo babies and chanted slogans against corruption. But the government's response was not dialogue, it was force. The police, armed with riot gear, were deployed to crush the demonstrations. The standoff began, a tense and volatile confrontation between the analog power of the state and the digital-savvy generation demanding change. The air crackled with tension, a feeling that something was about to break. The breaking point arrived with shocking speed. As tens of thousands of protesters marched towards the heart of government power, the situation escalated dramatically. Clashes broke out, and the police response grew increasingly brutal. The anger that had been building for years finally boiled over. In an act of collective fury and desperation, protesters broke through police lines and surged towards the parliament building. On a Tuesday that will forever be etched in Nepal's history, the parliament was set ablaze. As protesters surged forward, the Nepal police opened fire. What followed was a massacre. Unarmed, young Gen Z protesters were shot and killed. The dream of a peaceful revolution died, replaced by the nightmare of a government murdering its own children. The revolution now had martyrs, their blood stained the streets of Kathmandu. The final toll, at least 51 people were killed, and over 1,300 were injured. These were shattered families, empty chairs at dinner tables, futures stolen. The violence was a point of no return. It galvanized the public and stripped the government of moral authority. The state had shown its true face. The fallen sacrifice became fuel for the final push to dismantle the old regime. With the Prime Minister resigned, Parliament in ashes, and the army maintaining a fragile peace, Nepal was in a state of political limbo. The old system was dead, but a new one had not yet been born. Into this vacuum stepped Hami Nepal and the digital native generation. They decided that if the physical parliament had failed them, they would build a new one online. The Hami Nepal Discord server, which had grown to over 130,000 members, transformed from a protest coordination hub into a de facto digital parliament. It was a radical experiment in direct democracy, powered by the internet. What followed was an impromptu constitutional convention and an election, all held within the channels of the server. Moderators organized live debates where potential candidates could present their vision for an interim government. These weren't traditional politicians. Candidates included figures respected by the youth, like the popular anti-establishment mayor of Kathmandu, Balan Shah. The process was messy, chaotic, and breathtakingly innovative. It was, as one moderator noted, like a real election but faster, more transparent, and completely free of the influence of corrupt traditional political parties. After rounds of debates and organized voting, a clear consensus emerged. The Digital Assembly chose former Chief Justice Sushila Karki as their candidate for interim Prime Minister. Karki was a widely respected figure, known for her staunch anti-corruption record and her integrity. qualities that stood in stark contrast to the regime the youth had just toppled. Her selection was a powerful statement. The youth weren't seeking anarchy, they were seeking competence, justice, and a leader they could trust. They had torn down the old system and in a matter of days proposed a viable, respected alternative. Armed with this powerful digital mandate, leaders from the Gen Z movement and Nepal entered into negotiations with the military, which now held the keys to the state. They presented their case. The people had spoken, not in a rigged election, but in a massive, open digital forum. They had chosen a leader. The army, seeing the overwhelming public support for the proposal and seeking a swift and stable resolution, agreed. An agreement was made to dissolve the remnants of the old parliament and formally appoint Sushila Karki as the head of an interim government. The Discord election had become a reality. On a historic Friday night, Sushila Karki was sworn in, becoming Nepal's first-ever female prime minister. Her appointment was the culmination of the whirlwind revolution, a victory born from hashtags VPN street battles digital votes. It was a moment of profound hope for a nation weary of corruption and conflict. Karki's immediate task: steer the country towards stability, heal the deep wounds of the uprising, pave the way for a new, truly democratic future. Formal national elections were scheduled for March 5, 2026. The revolution had fundamentally reconfigured the landscape of Nepali politics. It demonstrated the immense power of a united, digitally savvy youth. Gen Z proved they were not apathetic or disengaged. They became a potent political force capable of toppling a government. Social media, once dismissed as trivial, proved a powerful tool for mobilization and change. Their uprising became an inspiration for youth movements across the globe, a case study in how to challenge authoritarianism in the 21st century. As Nepal begins rebuilding, the spirit of the revolution lives on. The Nepal Discord server remains active, a watchdog in civic space. The youth are determined not to let their friends' sacrifices be in vain. They demand transparency, accountability, a seat at the table. The old guard has been shattered. A new generation has claimed its right to lead. The fight for real democracy is a marathon, not a sprint. The road ahead is uncertain, hope is fragile, but for the first time in a long time, it is real. A hope born not from empty promises, but from the courage and ingenuity of Nepal's youngest citizens. They stared into the abyss of state failure and instead of despairing, built a bridge to the other side with the tools in their hands. They changed their country forever. Even in the shadow of the world's tallest mountains, the loudest voice for change can come from the palm of your hand.